Yeah, thank you, Vince, for introduction. So this is my joint work with Martin Lackner, and the most part of this work emerged when we were still in Oxford postdocs in this group. So before I describe the formal setting, and I would like to introduce. No, because this is only for recording. This is not a microphone. I will try to speak loud. So before I explain the formal setting, I would like to give some intuitive explanation of the high-level idea and of the background information through the following very simple example that is given in this green box. So in this example, we have 5 alternatives denoted by the Latin letters A, B, C, D, E, and we have 100 voters. And I will use the word alternatives and candidates interchangeably. So the first 66 voters approve 3 candidates, A, B, C. The next 33 voters approve D, and 1 voter approve E. Our goal is to select, let's assume that our goal is to select 3 candidates. How such a committee should be assembled? Clearly, there's no good single answer, and many depends on a particular context and on the particular application. These sets of application can be somehow distinguished and divided into several bags. And for each of these bags, we can find some very high-level idea that could correspond to how this committee should be constructed. So for instance, if our goal is to select a representative assembly, such as a parliament, then probably we would like to follow the idea of proportionality. And in such a case, a good committee could be the one that consists of candidates A, B, and D. Indeed, for such a committee, each group of voters has the number of approved candidates that is proportional to the size of this committee. If our goal is to represent the diversity of opinions in the committee, then probably the better committee would be A, D, and E, since in such a committee each voter is represented by some candidate. If our goal is to select the candidates that are individually best, that is to follow the idea of individual excellence, and this might be the case, for instance, if the voters correspond to the judges in a competition, then probably the best committee would be that consists from A, B, and C. Right. So we can see that these ideas are quite intuitive and quite easy to define in this very simple profile, especially in profiles where the approval sets of the voters are either the same or disjoint. Right. However, if these approval sets overlap, the question of what is a good proportional committee, what is a good diverse or individual excellent committee is not that clear. And the main result that I'm going to talk about is that basically, if you are interested in a certain subclass of committee election rules, the class that satisfies a certain axiom of consistency as defined by Young, and I'm going to recall this definition as well, then what we need to do is we need to define, then it is sufficient to define what proportionality, diversity, and individual excellence means on such very simple subdomain, and these notions uniquely extend to the much broader domain where these overlapping sets can be, where these approval sets can be overlapping. Okay, so now let me formalize the setting. We are given a set of candidates, a set of voters, and the voters express their preferences by approving subsets of candidates. And additionally, we are given a constant K, which is the desired size of a committee. So I will call size K subsets of candidates as committees. And approval-based committee ranking rule, in short ABC ranking rule, is a function that maps approval profiles into weak orders over committees, and most of the results which I will be talking about will be formalized for approval-based committee ranking rules, though some of these results also, like most of these results, also hold when we move to ABC choice rules, that is the functions that map approval profiles into sets of winning committees. One of our contributions was identifying a class of a subclass of ABC ranking rules that we call ABC counting rules. Each class within this each rule within this class is defined by a function f of xy, and intuitively fx of y denotes the score that the voter assigns to a committee W, provided that this voter approves exactly X members of this committee and exactly Y candidates in total. Given that such a function, we can compute the score that a committee receives by summing up the number of points that it garners from all the voters. And such a function, f of x of y, defines a corresponding ABC ranking rule, which ranks committees according to the number of points that they receive in total. And additionally, it also defines the corresponding choice rules, which selects the committees with the highest score. So this class is pretty large and contains a lot of known ranking rules and choice rules. Examples include proportional approval voting, where this score is defined as the harmonic value, the X harmonic number. It includes multi-winner approval voting, where which is defined by a counting function linear of the number of the argument X. It also contains approval chambering current rule and satisfaction approval voting. And you can see that some of these rules actually ignore the second argument, the number of alternatives approved in total by vote. So our main first result is an axiomatic characterization of this class of ABC counting rules. And we use this through the axiom of consistency. And consistency says that if we have two disjoint populations of the voters, A and A prime, and if the population A believes that the committee W1 is weakly preferred over W2, and population I prime has the same preferences, then if we combine these two populations, then in such a combined population, W1 should be also weakly preferred than W2. And technically, this axiom also says that if we replace one of these inequalities by the strict inequality, then also in the combined populations, we should have a strict inequality. So formally, our result says that ranking rule is an ABC counting rule if and only if this rule satisfies the axioms of symmetry, consistency, weak efficiency, and continuity. So you can see that here we have 4 axioms, but I put an emphasis on consistency. And even though the set of these axioms is minimal. So we cannot get the same characterization if we remove any of these axioms. And why is the case? Because consistency is in fact the most distinctive axiom that plays the most instrumental role in our characterization. Indeed, symmetry is actually satisfied by most of the reasonable rules, but by virtually any rule that is considered in the literature. Weak efficiency is a very weak axiom, and continuity is more technical. Formally, weak efficiency says that if we have a committee and if we replace one member of this committee by a candidate that is not approved by anyone, then we do not get a better committee, which is very reasonable. And continuity is a technical axiom which says that if we clone a population of voters sufficiently many times, then this population eventually can dictate the decision. Okay, so that was our main contribution, the first main contribution to the axiomatic characterization of the class of ABC counting rules. However, we ask additional question: what is the landscape of the internal? What is the internal part of this class? And especially, we are interested in these 3 rules, in understanding the difference between these 3 rules. And can we find axioms that describe the difference between these rules? And the answer is yes. That by looking only at specific, very simple subdomain, we can find we can describe the difference between these 3 rules. What is this subdomain? We call this subdomain we call profiles in this subdomain party list profiles. A party list profile is a profile where two approval sets of any 2 voters are either disjoint or the same. So for instance, this is an example of an approval profile, of a party list profile. And indeed, for this profile, we can group the voters and candidates into so-called parties, where each group where each group of voters vote only for a single party. Right? And having this simple setting of party list profiles allows us to reuse the whole knowledge about proportionality from the literature on apportionment. In particular, we can say that we can define don't proportionality as a property which says that a rule should behave on this simple subdomain of party risk profiles exactly as the don't method of apportionment. And in fact, adding to our set of axioms, this axiom of don't proportionality axiomatically characterizes PAV. So PAV is the only rule which satisfies these axioms. And you can notice that here the lack of the axiom of weak efficiency, because this axiom this time is implied by the combination of these axioms. One could also think about the weaker form of proportionality, that is lower quota. And lower quota basically says that the number of candidates approved by each group should be roughly proportional to should be at least the floor of the size of the committee divided by the size of this group as a fraction of the size of the population. And in fact, we managed to show that with this weaker form of proportionality, we can get rules which are not exactly equal to proportional approval voting, but which are very close. In fact, we can show that the counting function, the shapes of the counting functions that define functions satisfying lower quota needs to be in this region which surrounds the counting function for PAV. Analogously, we obtained characterizations of approval chambering current rule by replacing the don't proportionality by disjoint diversity. And basically, disjoint diversity says that if we have at most k parties, then each such a party should get at least one representative. And in some sense, this intuitively says that voters should not be ignored and that we should respect the diversity of opinion. Additionally, if we replace the disjoint diversity by disjoint equality, which says that if each candidate is approved by at most one voter, that is, each candidate has roughly the same has the same support or no support in the society, then each committee that consists of approved candidates should be winning. Then this axiom guarantees that the only rule satisfying all those axioms will be multi-winner approval voting. Okay, so let's look once again at these three theorems, at these three characterizations of proportional approval voting, of chambering current, and of multi-winner approval voting. Let's look only at the axioms, and let's see that all these rules, all these characterizations share three axioms. That is symmetry, consistency, and continuity, which means that basically the difference between these rules can be axiomatically described only by looking at these one axioms of disjoint diversity, disjoint equality, disjoint diversity, and don't proportionality. That is by looking only at how these rules behave on this simple subdomain of apportionment subdomain of party list profiles. Okay, so to wrap up, our goal for this project was to achieve axiomatic understanding of a class of consistent multi-winner rules, and to explain the differences, the different landscape of these rules. In particular, we obtained the characterization of ABC counting rules as those which are characterized by the axiom of consistency. And within this class, we obtained also characterization of proportional approval voting, approval chambering current rule, and multi-winner approval voting. And given that, I believe that our understanding of the class of consistent rules is much better, is much more advanced. However, as a next challenge, I consider getting a better understanding of class of rules which do not satisfy, which fail the axiom of consistency. And in particular, one can show that on the apportionment setting, there are several different rules which behave as don't proportionality, as don't method. For instance, one of those rules is also the Fragmain rule, and still there are rules which are proportional outside of those rules satisfying the axiom of consistency, and I think that this is a nice challenge to, and a nice open question to look at. Okay, so thank you for your attention. Yeah, sure. Disjoint equality. Yeah, it says that if we have a profile where each candidate is either not approved by anyone or approved only by a single voter. In particular, this means that in particular this is also a part of these profiles, because if each voter is approved only by a single candidate, single voter or non-voters, then all approval sets are either disjoint or the same. Then in such a case, then if we have a committee that consists only of those candidates who are approved, then such a committee will be winning, and no other committees will be winning unless there are less than K approved candidates.
And why is this standard approval voting just summing everything the only rule that satisfies that?
Yeah, for instance, for proportional approval voting, we can look at this. Let's say that we have two voters, and one approves ABC and the other approves DEF, right? And we are looking for three candidates. So the proportional way would be to get two guys from the approval set of the first guy and one from the second guy, right? And this would be the only winning, and the committee that consists of three candidates approved only by the first guy would not be proportional, so would not be winning. And actually defining that is sufficient to characterize multi-winner approval voting. And why we believe that this corresponds to the idea of individual excellence? Because in such a simple profile, basically each candidate gets the same support, right? So support of a single vote, right? And if we believe that each voter can be looked as an objective judge, which has the same voting power, then basically this is the way to go.
And it's crucial that it's any such.
Exactly. This is crucial.
So you mentioned Young, so Young and Smith have this somewhat similar sounding characterization as the first one. Can you compare a little bit, or is there like some sort of unifying result?
Sure. Okay, so basically the difference here is that we are in the approval setting, but there exists also a similar result where I'm also a co-author that works for order, that characterizes a similar class of committee scoring rules in the ordinal setting. These characterizations are very similar in terms of axioms, but basically the techniques are quite different to obtain that. And the techniques combine several insights, and one of those, this is basically a more complex induction, which takes the Young's characterization as a base step and then tries to do something else. But the whole point is that why these characterizations are quite different and why they require different techniques. To understand that is that it's good to think to do this thought exercise. In the committee elections, we have the case where two committees might overlap, and basically to deal with these overlapping committees is the whole challenge, because in the Young setting, the two candidates are in some sense separate. And to deal with the overlapping committees basically is the main challenge, which makes it impossible, at least for us, made it impossible to reuse Young's theorem and to obtain these results, and to basically do it with a new set of techniques.